Customers are both obviously the large domestic auto manufacturers as well as overseas. So how does that mix shake out in terms of some of these tax proposals on import-export type provisions that might actually affect you?
Well, for Tenneco, we have a fundamental principle that we've followed for many years. And that one of many fundamentals, but one of them is we manufacture in the region where we're going to sell our product. Our products don't ship that well to begin with. They're bulky. You're shipping a lot of air. It insulates us from duties changing, exchange rates fluctuating, and you can look at our results over the last 8 or 9 years and see even with changing currencies, we have had a steady progression of margin improvements, not damaged our profitability at all. We're actually a small net exporter out of the United States. But having said that, the only problematic talk that you do here is around economic protectionism, which I think would not be good, obviously, for the economy, business, and generally, certainly not for manufacturing.
Does that include the border adjustment tax? Are you against that?
I am questioning it, that's for sure, on several counts. Number one, the global supply chain has been put in place over decades now, right? You cannot unwind that very easily. Secondly, we know that this, because the United States is a net importer, that it is going to have an effect on prices. Now, you can start betting on currency adjustments or not. As I told you a moment ago, our principle is we don't like betting on them. We'd rather just have a natural hedge against them, and we do, because we know there's 1,000 variables that go into currencies. And the other problem I see is with the current climate of a protectionist attitude. If you couple that with a border tax, my fear is unintended consequences out there. Obviously, the retaliation. I think it's something we have to be very, very careful of. So, yeah, I'm very, very concerned about that.
Even though the policy doesn't sound like it would necessarily affect Tenneco.
No, specifically, but I have never been one to look. I believe what's good for the overall economy, good for overall business, good for manufacturing, ultimately is going to be good for our company as well.
When people ask you about automation and how it's going to shape productivity, manufacturing, employment over 5 to 10 years, what do you say?
Well, clearly, it's been ongoing for many years. I mean, I just mentioned I started manufacturing 40 years ago. The plant floor I walked on 40 years ago compared to the plant floor today, there's no resemblance whatsoever. Our jobs are now highly professional, literally, for the most part, technological jobs. So the jobs have changed, and yes, there are fewer of them, and yes, that productivity march almost has to continue to stay competitive. I do think we have a responsibility to look at certain dislocations that may cause and certainly help people transition into the newer skills that are required nowadays.
What's your take right now on the auto cycle in North America? Some talk about sliding used car prices, heavy incentives. I mean, have we kind of rolled over from a top?
You know, well, we're sitting at around 17.5 million units, right, which is phenomenal. And people are talking about peak volume. They mention the things that you do. The age of the fleet is still quite substantial out there, so there's still a lot of replacement guy. Fuel prices are down. The mix of vehicles is very strong, if you will, for that reason. And we're happy. If you can stay up in that 17.5 million, even on a plateau basis, that's good for our business, no question about it. And we see globally, China still growing, certainly not at double-digit levels like it once did, but still growing. We see Europe, more in a recovery still, but those units growing, right? About the only region of the world that's still, and it's not that big for us, is an issue is South America. So.
Any problems you sense on the financing side? Interest rates are rising in this country, including auto loans, and there's a number of subprime auto loans out there increasingly being delinquent.
I think that's something to watch closely, for sure, and we do. But interest rates rising, I'm in the camp that interest rates still do need to rise some. I think that's all a part of a stabilizing economy, and we're nowhere close to what you would, in any historical reference, call a high interest rate, period. So I'm not overly concerned about that, but yeah, it's something to pay attention to, that's for sure.
Well, you guys have some crazy trailers outside showing off some of your goods. It's great to see you, Greg.
It's great to be here. Thank you all very much for the